As you look at Psalm 139, just want to read a few things before you take communion tonight. And I want you to listen as we've been talking about what it means to have God cleanse our lives. He says, O Lord, thou hast searched me, and thou know me. Thou know my downsettings and my uprisings. Thou understand my thought afar off. Would you say that's true? Does God know every time you're depressed? See, that's a nice way of saying, are you depressed? Your ups and your downs, your moments you rise and the moments you fall. He says, God knows. Well, Steve, are you sure? Yes. Because if you could get the Lord angry and do something he didn't know, then he wouldn't be God. So that tells me that he has to know everything about you before he took you, which means that you cannot really shock him. You cannot disturb him. Because if you could, he wouldn't be God. So the question now rises, why then do I get so upset if I blow it? Like, God, I'm sorry I let you down. Like God didn't know you were going to? God knew that you were going to. He told you. He knows everything you're going to do, your uprisings and your downfallings. He knows everything. And yet, it is the love of God that has accepted you. He goes on to say here, thou know my downsettings, my uprisings, and thou understand my thought afar off. Thou compassest my path with lying down, and art acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word in my tongue, but lo, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. Thou hast beset me behind and before, and thou lay thy hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. Whither shall I go from thy spirit? Whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the other parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lay upon me, thy right hand shall hold me. You know, it doesn't make a difference where you go, what you do. It doesn't make a difference if you say, God, you don't understand. He does. God, first of all, knows you in verses 1 through 3. O Lord, thou search me, and God, you know me. Thou knowest my downsettings and my uprisings. Thou understand my thoughts afar off. Verse 4. There is not a word in my tongue, but lo, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. Verse 23. Search me, O God, and know my heart. 4 times. 4 times. God, you know me. Is that cool or what? I mean that God knows you. There's a great verse in the Bible that says, and God remembered Noah. Well, thank God. He's out there floating a boat for a lot of months. And then for some reason, it says in the King James, and God remembered Noah. Not that he forgot, but just thank God he remembered. But when you think of communion, you think of, God, I can't believe you know me. No one else knows me. So that's a big church. No one knows me. God knows you. He knows when you get up. Some of you get up at 6:35. He knows when you go to bed. Some of you are getting old and you go to bed at 9 o'clock now. He knows when you wake up how many times you have to go to the bathroom. He knows when you drink way too much water. He knows every bone that aches in your body. He knows every question that's going to be asked today of your life. You see, when it says such knowledge is too wonderful, it's not that you understand God, it's that God understands you. You don't have to understand him. He'll never change. But the very fact that in your life, that there is someone that knows you the way that you think, And to me, because he made you and because he bought you, it just makes sense that God knows you. He knows when you need to be touched. He knows when you are about to break. You see, that's the knowledge that should cause us to absolutely give our burdens to God. It's not that I can stand here before you and expound the great knowledge, and people do that. That's not what it's about. It's just the other way around. I don't want to worship you because you know God. I want to worship God because he knows me. And then he says, what I think. In verse 2, thou knowest my downsettings, my uprisings, and what I think. And then he says, and I know where you go. In verse 3, he knew where Jacob was. He knew where Jonah was. He knew where Adam was. Thou can pass my path, my lying down, thou art there. He knows what freeway Pat's going to take. He knows what time Pat's going to get home. He knows what words Pat's going to say to Mary when he sees her. He knows what time Pat is going to go zonk out quick tonight. You see, that is a knowledge that we take for granted. God, you know me. But secondly, God knows my thoughts. Look at verse 4. For there is not a word in my tongue, but lo, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. And then not only what I say, but what I need. Look at verse 5 and 6. Thou hast beset me behind and before, hast laid thy hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. In other words, God, you know my thoughts. You know my needs. So, God, why do I have to beg? You don't. And then, one more section. God knows my whereabouts. This is really important. You remember sometimes I kid you that God knows where you live? Well, listen. In verses 7 through 12. Whither shall I go from thy spirit? Or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up to heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me up. If I run away from God, like Jonah, he's going to hold me. If I make a stupid mistake like Naomi did, leaving Bethlehem, he'll bring me back. If I question like Peter and Paul, he's going to help me. And then he holds me. Not only does God see me, but he holds me. In verse 13, for though thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I hate my nose, I hate this, I hate that. I am marvelously in thy works. My soul knoweth right well. My substance was not hid from thee. When I was made in secret and curiously wrought in the lower parts of the earth. Thy eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect, and in thy book all the members were written which continue fashionably. How precious also are your thoughts unto me. Bible says God's thoughts for you are more than the sands of the seas. If I should count them, they are more in number than the sands. When I awake, I am still with you. Surely thou wilt slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me. In other words, is there any place tonight we can go? No. Is there any place that we can hide? No. Then here's why I'm saying all this tonight. If it's not about me, then who's it about? Him. This is what it's all about. You see, sometimes we think that if I want Pat to love me, I have to love Pat in a certain way. Vice versa. That's how we think. God takes you just like you are. God does not want you to clean up. God does not want you to be perfect. There's no way you can. All you have to do is acknowledge one thing tonight. God knows you. He knows when to speak to you. He knows when to go after you. He knows when to bring you to your knees. He knows when to do a work in your life. So tonight, during communion, during this moment of our lives, I want you to say, God, your knowledge is incredible. You know everything about me, and you still love me. This is a God I want to get to know. And you know something? He has made his way known to you tonight.